Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, our national webinar hosted by Ostomy Canada Society. We're really glad to have you with us today. My name's Troy, and I'm one of the directors on our board of directors for Ostomy Canada, and I'm happy to be our moderator and to be able to provide a bit of an introduction to our featured presenters today. Before I get into that, I just want to remind everybody that today's webinar is being recorded. We're going to have it available as a recording on our ostomycanada.ca website afterwards for anyone who wants to watch it again, or if you want to share it with your friends, your family, your colleagues. We are going to be having a question and answer period at the end of this presentation. Both of our presenters, Ann and Rosemary, will be available at the end to answer some of those. And we do thank everybody who spent some time submitting their questions in before this presentation. The majority of them should be answered, but we definitely have flagged some that we'll be able to bring up at the end of the presentation. So what I'll do now is I'm going to quickly introduce both of our presenters here, and I'm going to ask them to share their relationship to the disability tax credit. So our first presenter today is going to be Ann Durkee, and Ann is the chair of the board of directors for Ostomy Canada. She joined her local ostomy chapter in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, following her ostomy surgery in 2002. And over the years, she realized that giving support was important in the ostomy world, and in 2016 she became the regional administrator for Atlantic Canada. She represented Atlantic Canada and also sat on the board of directors. This became a big priority in her life, of course. And during her 4-year regional term, she traveled to chapters and peer support groups in the Atlantic provinces and noticed that the DTC was not being applied for nor being discussed as an option. I'll let her talk a little bit more about that afterwards, but we really appreciate Ann being on today and providing her expertise and her time. So I'm also going to introduce Rosemary Hill. She is also one of our featured presentations today. And Rosemary has been a nurse for over 35 years and is the recipient of the Award of Excellence in Practice from the Association of Registered Nurses of British Columbia. She works at Lionsgate Hospital as a nurse specialized in Wound Ostomy and Continence, or an NSWOC, and her past volunteer activities include the role of president for nurses specialized in Wound Ostomy and Continence Canada. As well, she participates as a member on the BC Provincial Skin and Wound Committee, chairs the Provincial Ostomy Committee, and is an expert speaker at national and international events. Most recently, volunteers' activities have taken her to Argentina, where she provided wound education. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Ann to our presentation here, and I'm going to ask Ann to just give us a little bit of an overview of what got her to be passionate about the DTC and talk about her relationship with the disability tax credit. So I'll pass it over to you, Ann, to introduce this first.
Thank you, Troy. I do indeed have a passion for the disability tax credit. Not so much the credit, but the people that I can assist to make them aware. How I got started in this was I, in 2022, as you said, had surgery after 3.5 years of being very ill with ulcerative colitis and had a complete colectomy. And I was fortunate enough to have an Ostomy Canada visitor. And that visitor really filled me in on a lot of information, what type of journey I was going to go through, how at points in the coming or the first year that I would have difficulties, both mentally and physically, and I did. But I always knew that this visitor was there. I knew I could speak to her anytime, day or night. So she told me about the disability tax credit. And she also told me that I had to wait a year. So like waiting for your first wedding anniversary, I waited for my first ostomy anniversary. And then I found the forms on CRA. Nobody in my local chapter knew anything about it either. So I got the forms and I filled it out, and I had an excellent physician at that time, and he was more than willing to certify it. And off it went, and within a few weeks it was back certified. And I was a happy camper, excuse me, because I was still working, so I had a good taxable income, and it certainly helped, and it's helped. This is the 21st year of living with an ostomy, so every time that I file that tax credit off to Mr. Trudeau, I know that I have an extra $8,500 that will come off of my taxable income. So I look back over the 21 years and say, you know what, that visitor really, really helped me. So then through the journey of having an ostomy and accepting it and knowing that so many people in Canada had the same thing that I did, I joined Ostomy Canada and become a director on the board. And then that same year I become Atlantic Regional Administrator. And in the Atlantic, our ostomy groups are widespread, and we have 4 provinces. So decided to get out in the field and see what these people knew and see what they thought and see if they were getting proper care. And because this DTC was one of my pet concerns, I spread the word. And it was just amazing how many people, in fact, it was a shock how many people didn't know. So I went back to Ostomy Canada and said, we're here with a mission, and it is to support people with Ostomy Canada. And everybody around the table knew that. And I said, like, we need to make these people aware. We can't do it for them. We're not the CRA, but we can start advertising about it. We can start talking about it. Every back door, every address, we can talk about it. So that's what I did in the Atlantic. And within a year or so, you know, I was still going to educational days and conferences and having people come up and say, I got it. I didn't even know it was available. And you know what? They went back 10 years and I got $12,000. Happy people. And I still hear those stories, and really proud that I got involved in it. And I had one heck of a committee to work with me. And Rosemary was my prime contact in the West, because we like to choose people from across Canada at Ostomy Canada. So Rosemary, I know she's there, and she probably has the same reasons that I do, but a bit different because she works with patients. So take it over, Rosemary.
Thanks, Rosemary. And while you get yourself off mute there and to share your side of the story, I just want to echo what Ann was saying about you know, being able to share this with people who didn't even know that DTC existed or this was an opportunity. And I often answer calls from quite a few different people across Canada in my role with NSWOC as well. And oftentimes it is about sharing a bit of information about the DTC. So now that I see you're on there, Rosemary, I'll pass it over to you to explain a little bit of your relationship to the DTC and advocacy for it.
Sure. Thank you, Troy. Thank you for the introduction. And it's wonderful to share the platform here with you. And I remember, Ann, I want to say something like around 2015, I was coming into the position of president-elect for the nurses specialized in wound ostomy continence. And at that time, I was just starting to learn about all the factors related to people have ostomy, but also wound care. And I heard about this ad hoc committee. Kathy Harley said, Rosemary, how would you like to be on that? And I was so keen and interested to see how I could make a difference. So then under the leadership of Ann, I joined the ad hoc committee and I began to learn so much about the disability tax credit. You know, I knew it existed and I would mention it to my patients, but I really didn't know the level of detail. And so I was kind of excited when the whole notion of creating a pamphlet came about, and to how could we spread the word to all groups of people, whether it was physicians, patients, people in different settings, even rehab. How could we spread the word? And the pamphlet was the beginning steps. And to this day, I'm going to tell you guys that almost about at least 2 or 3 times a month, I will see a patient in my outpatient clinic, and it now is just automatic. It's almost along the same lines of, how are you managing with your ostomy and skin? I'll say, oh, by the way, have you signed up for the disability tax credit? And I'm surprised at least 2 or 3 per month have never heard anything about it. And just like Ann, there's been a tremendous amount of joy in the last few years as people have, with the assistance of their physician or their nurse practitioner, have been able to complete that form and are now eligible and receiving that disability tax credit. But I think I'm going to stop there because I'd love for Ann to start walking us through this presentation. It's fairly long, but we would love questions. So we're going to share some information and just jot those questions down. And at the end of the time, we are just welcoming opportunity to give clarification on the disability tax credit. I'll hand it back to you, Troy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just I saw there was a question that came up about the Rosemary's video. You'll see Rosemary's face in our video here. We're just having some technical issues with her live video stream. So we promise Rosemary's there. And I'm sorry you had to look at me for a little bit too long, but there we go. All right, we're going to get over to our video now. And if you do have a question during the course of the presentation, just use that Q&A tool in your Microsoft Teams toolbar, and we'll be happy to get to it at the end. Okay, thanks everybody. And here's the video.
Thank you, Troy. The disability tax credit. People living with an ostomy are considered to have a disability and are eligible for the disability tax credit when a qualified medical practitioner certifies the disability tax credit and Canada Revenue Agency approves the application. Who should apply? Any person living with an ostomy, bowel and or bladder, or any person's spouse, common law partner, and a dependent under the age of 18 living together can apply for the person living with a disability. The information presented in this webinar is considered accurate, and updates can be found on the CRA DTC website. Ostomy Canada formed a DTC committee to research and to offer support to enhance awareness and profile, including the creation of a national brochure and making our national office phone line available to talk to people seeking information. When we formed this committee over 8 years ago, the DTC was not being applied for, nor being discussed as an option for our ostomy population. OCS engaged frontline professionals such as NSWOCs, surgeons, pharmacists, physicians, and clinicians. We all needed to work together to make our people aware of the DTC. Our goal was to support. In order to support and make aware, the new DTC committee asked the question, where do people living with an ostomy go to ask questions about the DTC? Obvious contacts were surgeons, physicians, NSWOCs, pharmacists, the ostomy groups, and others living with an ostomy. Most didn't go to the most obvious spot, the CRA DTC website or Ostomy Canada website. We implemented a plan. We sent an ad to the health professional webmasters in Canada to educate. We improved our information on our website. We made contact with all health professionals and their medical journals. We worked directly with the NSWOC Association to encourage them to inform their patients. These were the grassroots. And in time, we connected. Our call line at Ostomy Canada's national office became a central avenue for DTC inquiries. And now I'll pass it over to Rosemary.
Thanks, Ann. You know, as I mentioned earlier, it was a really neat opportunity. Gosh, it's 8 years ago, doesn't feel like that. And I was coming in as the president-elect to nurses specialized in wound, ostomy, and continence. And this opportunity came along to be part of an ad hoc committee around the disability tax credit. And I've just really appreciated that those meetings where I began to fully understand and begin to think about how could we spread the word. And I loved the leadership of Ann in terms of let's get a brochure going. So we began to create this brochure because we thought we have to spread the word, and having it in a pamphlet format to guide people step by step was really going to be helpful in disseminating information. So more recently, I think it was just about last year, Ann said, you know, I think it's time to spiff up that brochure. Let's see what we can do to just put something eye-catching in. So we just had to revise the brochure as there were a few changes. And so I recently had a patient who now had a permanent ostomy. And I reached out to Barbara and I said, Barbara, how would you feel about being on the cover of the disability tax credit pamphlet? And Barbara was only too willing. So that's my patient, Barbara. And we were sitting down together, walking through how to do the application for the disability tax credit. And hence that brochure has been created, version 2. And you'll see that it's available by calling Ostomy Canada. It's certainly on their website. It's on our website of the NSWOC. And we can dispatch kits. With the dispatch kits, sometimes with patients, we put a pamphlet in as well. I think that let's now take a little bit of a deeper dive and look at what is the disability tax credit. And this is something I try to talk about to both my colleagues, my NSWOC colleagues, but most importantly, my patients. And the disability tax credit, it's a non-refundable tax credit that helps persons with disabilities or their supporting family members because it's non-refundable. It reduces the amount of income tax they may have to pay. And this is something that you apply to the CRA. Eligibility is not based on a diagnosis, but rather on the effects of the impairment on the ability to perform the basic activities of daily living. There are some key caveats about applying for the disability tax credit. And what we thought with this webinar, it would be helpful to walk you through them step by step and give you those key ingredients for you to be aware of in terms of when you would like to apply for the disability tax credit. Let's go to the next slide. So to apply, yes, indeed, from when we began the process 8 years ago, where it was maybe 6 pages, it's now 12 pages. But you know what? I believe it's a much cleaner, understandable form to complete. And we're going to walk you through those pages. There are some new things that we want to share with you. And Ann is going to be more specific about those new things. One thing I always emphasize to my patients is you must have a permanent ostomy or a temporary ostomy for at least 12 months. So I try to remind my urostomy patients, don't forget, I want to see you in a year's time because I want to reach out and we're going to take some time to help you discover the application process for the disability tax credit. When people, first of all, have an ostomy, there's so much going on. So I'm getting to a place where I'm almost putting it in my calendar because I need to remind them at that 12-month mark about their eligibility. So those are some, as I say, key points when it comes to the application. So let's go to the next slide, how to apply. Well, we're going to reach out to both either your medical practitioner or your nurse practitioner, and they can help actually sign the form, but the medical practitioner can help you, remind you of that date of surgery you had, the type, and the effects. And the CRA website is the best place, only place to download the form, and there's a fillable form as well on the computer. I find what I do is I set up a meeting time with the patient and I show them, in case they're not familiar with the internet, I take them to the CRA website, we download the form, and we look at each of the sections And then thereafter, they go to their physician or their nurse practitioner, and they sign the completed document. They'll review it with them to make sure the information is accurate, and then they sign the form. And I'm going to pass things on to you and jump in on any of the other points in case I've missed anything in those previous slides. Thanks, Ann.
Thanks, Rosemary. It's enlightening to hear that you as a NSWOC nurse sit down with a patient that is applying for the DTC. It definitely confuses them when they see it and they quite don't understand it. So it helps that your link with your NSWOC nurses and my link with Ostomy Canada, that we are aware enough not to do it for them, but to at least make them aware of what it is and how you go about it. So, and that was our intent 8 years ago, and I think we've fulfilled that and will continue to do that. Ann,
I'll jump in a minute too. You know, I look at my own parents who are elderly and the familiarity with being on the computer, downloading a form or trying to fill it out. And, you know, some of the ostomy surgery that's happening nowadays, it is people who are maybe in their late 70s, early 80s. And so I just want to set them up for success and do it with them. And then they take things, they take the pamphlet with them, and then they head off to meet with their doctor.
Yeah. And I think it's better now with physicians and surgeons. I think that they know more about the form with our assistance, of course. But I think they've realized that, hey, that this person is in the category of being disabled. And yes, so we're going to help them get this credit against their taxable income. In the beginning, when we started, physicians didn't think that we were disabled, and they also didn't think that it was a credit. They thought it was a pension coming in every month and didn't want to get involved. So, you know, we've done all those hurdles, and now we're in a position where even CRA, right now they have a separate page on their website that it's directed to medical practitioners and medical people, all medical professionals, that how to fill out the form and why you're doing it. So they've also seen that those people had to be educated as well.
You know, such good points, Ann, because you're right. Some of the physicians have questions. So when the patient goes out the door, I attach my business card and I say to the patient, look, you know, this might be something new for your doctor or for your nurse practitioner. Just no problem. Just they can give me a call or they can email me. And so I can help unpackage the appropriate information about the DTC to the physician.
It all helps.
It all helps, yeah.
And to apply, you know, it becomes, as time goes on, it becomes simpler, and people like ourselves that are making people aware get to understand it. And then, of course, CRA will change things like they have with the recent form on October the 4th, 2021. But to apply, the old standby of requirements still stand. And, you know, you must have a permanent ostomy or a temporary ostomy for at least 12 months, like we said. You just have to be very careful that if you have a temporary ostomy, that if you have it for 12 months and you apply and maybe you have it for another year, another 5 years, and then it's reversed, please be very cautious and make sure that you let CRA know that you have had it reversed, because if it's reversed, you're no longer eligible for the disability tax credit. So you don't want them to come back on you in 10 years time and say, oh, you owe us all this money. So just be very cautious about that and very honest and upfront, and let them know when the temporary is changed so that you have it reversed. Another thing, the old ruling, the same as it was 8 years ago, you are restricted in eliminating all of the time, or at least 90% of the time. And the question on the new form has changed a little bit, but the requirement is still there. And of course, the old saying that we have pushed home for a long, long time is it takes an inordinate amount of time to manage bowel and or bladder functions. So that's pretty obvious if you have an ostomy, but that's what they want to hear. So to go on to the application, Rosemary's already explained where you get it. Their website has grown tremendously over the last 8 years. It's very easy to get it. There is one fillable. You can print it off, and I even believe you can send it in. You can send it from, yeah, you can send it there to your medical practitioner. He can sign it and send it in. You should always, when you do the form, complete it with accurate information. So you do need a medical practitioner, and they need to certify it. And they also, as Rosemary has said, they have information that we as a person living with an ostomy tend to forget. Like myself, last night, I had to really stop and think when the year was that I had my ostomy. So we don't always remember those things, but hopefully the doctor will have all those records and be able to put that in, because that's required as well. So now we'll move on to the form, the first page of the form. And they've really cleaned it up a lot. It has more pages. And when you open it up, you'll think, when I first opened it up, I thought, uh-oh. But take a look at it, because you will see that the government has divided it into sections. So there's a page for vision, there's a page for hearing, and a lot of other disabilities. So you don't have to fill those out. You can leave them in and send them in if you like, just cross a line through them, or you can not fill them out at all and leave them out. The reason why they've done this, so that one disability can have its own page in simple language. That's why they've done it. And another thing, this disability tax credit is not just for people that are underneath the umbrella of eliminating. It's for a numerous amount of disabilities. So that's why I think it's a lot better that now we have our own page on eliminating, which the elimination, that means that you have an ostomy. Some people have asked me what that means. But that's the page you would choose. And it has everything that Ostomy Canada needs to approve or decline whatever they're going to do with your application. So on October the 4th, 2021, the CRA released this new version of the DTC form. The form number is T2201. And as I say, it's lengthier. It also has more space for the medical practitioner to write more in detail of anything that he wants to write in to assist you to get the credit. So the following slides are the actual certificate, and we'll show you, we'll go first to the first page. And that's pretty simple. The disability tax credit certificate, it's the individuals section. So I have an ileostomy, so I would go to that section. And it just fills in your personal information. But there's a NOR in there halfway down in the page. And that's where if my husband had an ileostomy and I didn't, I could apply for the disability tax credit against my income, because I would be supporting him. I would have to support him. He would have no income. So that's where that goes. Also, a child under 18, anybody supporting a child under 18 and living in their house can apply for the credit. So that's where you put the pertinent information in there. Also, people and even medical professions, when we first started this, everybody thought, oh boy, I'm going to get a check back from CRA. This is great. You don't get a check back from CRA. It is a credit against your taxable income. So if you make $100,000 a year and your other deductions are taken off, then they will also, if you've been approved for this credit, they will also take off a certain amount. In my particular province, every province is different, but in my particular province, it's a little over $8,500 off of my taxable income. So if I wasn't working and was only maybe drawing old age in Canada pension, and it only accumulated to maybe $23,000 a year, you would have enough deductions or enough deductions credits off of your income that you wouldn't pay income tax. So therefore, you are not going to be eligible for the tax credit because there's nothing to give you a credit against. So anybody that's on a very low income, it's really tough to get one through. Sometimes it will be borderline and they will apply it. However, to explain it simply is when I had my ileostomy, somebody told me about the DTC credit. So on that very 12th month, I filled out my application. And I knew that I could fill it out after 12 months. And I sent it in and just hoped that I would be approved. I knew that I was eligible to apply. However, I had to be approved by the DTC committee at CRA. However, if I had not heard about the disability, like many, many people living with ostomies have not, I have had people come up to me and say, you know, I've never heard of this. How do I apply for it? And we ask the question, how long have you had your ostomy? And they'll say, oh, 23 years. 23 years, never knew anything about the credit, even they're still working. And then all of a sudden they can send it in. The government will go back 10 years if you give them permission to adjust your income tax returns for the past 10 years. So that's what this page is for. It asks you yes or no, whether you want them to do that. So if a person has their ostomy for 23 years and you put yes and you authorize it by signing it, you might get the approval for your disability tax credit right away, but it might take you a little while longer to get the check because they're doing another step. They're researching and going back and redoing all of your returns for 10 years, only up to 10 years. But I'll tell you how wonderful it can be. I've gone to many educational days and conferences, and somebody comes up and gives me a big hug and says, Ann, I got a $12,000 check in the mail, or I got a $14,000 check in the mail just because you told me about the DTC. It's just a wonderful feeling. I know, Rosemary.
It is, absolutely. Oh, and you're so right. Because I've had patients who've actually, you know, maybe had their ostomy even 40, 45 years, and they didn't know anything about it. Yeah. And yes, I've had many grateful patients. And you're right. The timing, the process was exactly what you said. They first of all receive a letter to say that their application has been accepted. And that they are looking back, but in the weeks ahead, you will receive a check. And that's generally how it works.
So to go forward, we'll go to the next page. And this is what I'm going to call our page. And I say our because I have an ileostomy. It's very personal to me. So I normally say our ostomy world. And I know I shouldn't because I look at somebody like Rosemary that is so conscious of her ostomy patients that it's her world as well. And it's also, it's her page as well. So this is a page that we can claim. We don't have to worry about the other pages unless, like I said, you happen to have a vision disability or a hearing disability, or you've lost some limbs. You can do two. And they look at those numbers now how much you get in those, I don't know. I haven't really talked to anybody that has two disabilities, but I do know that they get a much better credit than if you only have one disability. So this page is the new one that come out in 2021. And it kind of threw us for a bit because, you know, we on the committee and nurses like Rosemary, we want it to be very simple for people to apply. And this page kind of threw us because there was a lot of questions. Well, what does that mean? So I'm just going to go through it. I filled it in as if it was me. And this is how I have said to people, this is how you have to think when you look at this form. Don't get all alarmed about it. Just think, I'm going to answer this question talking about my ostomy, whether it's a urostomy or an ileostomy or a colostomy. Look at it as if it's mine. I have to somehow explain to the government about severity and frequency. So in the first question, it says, list any medical conditions that impact the patient's ability to manage bowel or bladder functions. And this is how I filled it out. Now, when this form first came out, I think I had a call from Rosemary, several other NSWOC nurses, several people that were applying, even a couple of accountants. And they said, what do we do with this? So I spent one day, over 5 hours on the phone trying to get through to the proper person of the CRA and the department that approves these. So what I thought that how we should fill this form out, it ended up to be correct. This is what they want to hear. No different than they wanted to hear things 5 years ago that we were, spent an inordinate amount of time in the bathroom, or that we wore our device 90 years. They're still asking those questions, but we don't have to write them out in a sentence form. They're just a blank question, yes or no. So to the question one, and this is what I would put and suggest to put. And please think that this is a part that your physician or your medical practitioner, nurse practitioner is filling out. So the patient was diagnosed in 2001 with ulcerative colitis, and in 2002 had surgery that resulted in an ostomy. This surgery is permanent and has resulted in the patient being markedly restricted in eliminating, even with an appropriate device. This patient takes an inordinate amount of time to personally manage bowel functions and wears a device to hold the bowel feces. The patient has an ileostomy. So that's describing me. So if you're filling out the form, or your doctor is, it's describing you, when you had it, what you had, the reason why you had it. I also, which I don't think there's a need to, but I put in patient takes an inordinate amount of time. You don't have to put that in because the question is at the bottom of the page. Mm-hmm. But I think when we're filling out these forms and they're going to CRA, that the more we repeat it, it's okay. They'll see it more than if we just say it once. So that's the old school in me, I guess. The next question, does the patient take medication to aid their limitations in bowel or bladder functions? Well, I've ticked off no, because I don't, but some people do. So if they do, they have to put that they do. And the next one, describe if the patient uses any devices or therapy. So the government calls our equipment, like some people call them, or they call them bags or whatever. But when the government talks about devices, that's what they're talking about, is our equipment that we use to eliminate. So this is how I filled out this section. The patient eliminates by way of a stoma, which empties into a device that she wears over the stoma at least 90% of the time. The device is changed at least once every 5 days, and often may have to change the device more often because of a leakage and or skin irritation. Very often, this can become very costly to keep up personal management. Now, in years past, people used to write diaries of how many times they changed, how many minutes they spent in bathrooms for a week, how much it costs them every week for the devices. You know what? The government does not have time to read a diary. So we've always encouraged, don't send that in. Follow what is suggested to you and what we know that the government wants to hear. They want to know 90%. They want to know that it's an inordinate amount of time. They want to know that you have an ileostomy and that you wear a device. It's all common words in their world. So now to the one that threw us for a loop in this new form, and it's a chart question. And they have added a section that you can write something in. When it first came out, it wasn't anything. You just had to choose one of those, and we didn't know why we were choosing it. So we've got that all straightened out, and that's what this committee does, is we do a lot of research, and we also have, you know, some advantages that we can get through to CAR and tell them that we're only making people aware of this, and we want to pass on the correct information. So in question 4, under severity, I have the severity of output, because that's what they're thinking. So what I put is moderate to severe, and as an ileostomy eliminates most of the time due to what one may eat and the digestive time involved. Consistency is mostly liquefied. Many foods are hard to digest and cause abdominal discomfort. So if I was a physician filling this out, they would likely put that, or I could coach them to do that, or I could, even if you have a really close knit relationship with your medical practitioner, you could even suggest what he should be saying, as long as he's agreeable to sign it. But it's telling them that my output is, I have made a choice in that chart. So the question I asked the committee at CRA was, what happened if I was like a friend of mine that has a very mild output? Some people do. Some people eat all the right things that they don't have an overload. Some people, just for no reason at all, it's difficult for them, and they don't have a lot of output. And it could be that they don't eat very much. You know, I don't know the health reason why they don't always. However, I asked the question, if I put mild, if I was a candidate applying for this that put mild, would you not approve my application? And she said, definitely not. This question, this chart has nothing to do with that. It's just, we have finally realized that we would like to know how you, the person applying for this, you know, how you, what your output is, and not in ounces, but is it severe? Or because some people is severe. You know, I have a girlfriend that, heaven forbid, it is so severe, I don't know how she keeps up with it. I'm in the middle, so that's what I put. And the same way with the frequency. Think about yourself always. So how frequent do you deal with this? Now this flips back to that 90% of the time, which I think that, you know, they're trying to just get a label on all these disabilities. It's not only eliminating that has this chart and this different question. It's every disability that they deal with with the disability tax credit. So I'm sure that if you have a leg missing, that they're asking these questions too, like how difficult is it for you to walk on one leg, and do you need a wheelchair often, and you know, do you go in crutches, or do you have an artificial limb? So those are all the things that they would fill out. So the frequency is what I put is frequency in managing the device emptying. I like to explain things, is usually 9 to 10 times in a 24-hour period. That's my norm. And my norm is probably a little bit high, but I don't like a full or a half full pouch unless I get caught somewhere. I empty a fair amount of time. So you just have to stop and think about yourself and what your life living with an ostomy and a device is like. And if you do that, I don't think any of you will have any problems, nor do I think that you will be denied for those reasons at all. And then we go down to the next questions, limitations and eliminating. Now, this goes back to the patient is unable or takes an inordinate amount of time. That they're still hanging with that old question. And we like that question. It's in our brochures. We make sure that all medical practitioners get that in there somewhere. CRA has realized that, hey, let's not make them write this, let's put it in, and they can tick off yes or no. So the yes in my application and the year that it began would go in here. And then it goes on, has the patient's impairment, bowel or bladder functions lasted, or is it expected to last for a continuous period of at least 12 months? Mine is for life, so I have ticked off yes. This is where the temporary one falls in. Right when you receive a temporary, the surgeon might say to you, you know, in 12 months or 24 months or 2 years, 4 years, we might be able to reverse this. I don't ever hear of anybody saying, yeah, you've had it in June and next June we're going to reverse it. When that time comes, they have to look at everybody's situation and decide whether to reverse it. So once again, if you have a temporary over 12 months, you can apply for it. And if that temporary stays with you for a very long time, you can keep collecting that credit. However, if it is reversed, just make sure you're honest and upfront, and that you proceed to the CRA and announce that you no longer have an ileostomy and you no longer can collect that credit. That's only honesty, I think. So the next page is this here is the page that if you have more than one disability. So I wouldn't fill this page out at all because I only have the stoma and the ileostomy. But if I couldn't walk and was in a wheelchair, or if I couldn't speak, or if I couldn't see or hear, then this is the page that you can tick off 2 blocks and complete the rest of the page. And it just tells them that you have 2 disabilities. And then the next one is life-sustaining therapy. Rosemary could probably give you many examples of life-sustaining therapies. I certainly don't or are not involved in this in my particular case, but I know that there are patients that have an ileostomy or an ostomy that, you know, they need to have therapy constantly. And if this is the case, I think of one gal that I knew, she had her ileostomy the same time I did. And 3.5 years later, she still had an open wound and had to have a nurse come in every 2 days to unpack it and repack it. And anyway, she was much sicker than I was. I recovered very quickly. She was a very sick lady and had many more problems than I did. I had ulcerative colitis and my ileostomy cured that. So, but anyway, she could have, if gone to this page and filled it out, and it would have been very applicable. So, but your doctor or your NSWOC nurse, Ostomy Canada does not pretend at any point in time to give advice on people's health and to say, you know, no, you don't need that therapy because, and so you can't get the DTC. All we're here for, Ostomy Canada, is to make them aware. Go on the CRA site and the form is there. We will assist you if you have any questions. We'll give you the brochure. You can go on our website. And that's where our bus stops, because we are not professional people. We're supporting people living with ostomies in Canada. And this is one of our support systems, is just to make people aware. Now, Rosemary has another link to her making people aware, is because she is a health professional and she can explain more of the health issues that might be asked in these forms. So her or a physician or a nurse practitioner would be the people to go to ask those questions, not Ostomy Canada. Right. And the last page is certification. It's mandatory. Now, if you remember on the old form, the only 2 people we could go to to get certification were a physician, and it's much, you're much more profitable to get a signature or certification if you have a doctor. In today's world, many of us don't have a doctor. So you're sort of in limbo. If you can get in to see a nurse practitioner, that's great. If not, you know, there's outpatients. I find most outpatients don't know you. They don't know your history, and they don't want to fill out the form. So this is why that CRA has changed its form. And as you can see on this, there you have the option of getting different people now, different health professionals to sign the application. Now, the sad part is, and we are definitely, Ostomy Canada and NSWOC together as partners, are advocating to the Disability Advisory Committee of CRA to get NSWOC's name on here for certification, because most people deal with NSWOCs in their journey rather than, you know, even a physician. So any of these people you can tick off, and apparently they can certify it. It's not just 2 people anymore, but I can assure you that this will be a nonstop journey for us to get the NSWOCs. They are the best qualified to assist you and to certify this form. We've always thought that, and we are trying very hard. I just recently, in the last month, received DAC, which is the Disability Advisory Committee from the government. And one of their requests, there's 10 of them that are going to the government for approval. And one of them is that we can have professionals sign the tax credit application, and that any medical professional person that carries a license and is educated will be able to sign it. Now, hopefully, that next step, which needs approval, hopefully that will get approved. And I must say the difficulty here, and we know this because we've advocated this for 8 years, is that the disability tax credit in Canada falls under the budget. So every time there's changes, it has to go to more than one step. It just can't go to the Minister of Health. He has nothing to do with this. That seems funny to say that, but he doesn't, or he or she doesn't. It goes to the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Finance and his committee have to present it in the budget. If it's passed in the budget, then we will get what we're asking for. Well, it didn't the last time that we asked, and we made a big ask. We even went to Ottawa and did that. However, we will and always will continue to get that, because it will be easier for ostomy people in our country to go to an NSWOC. They are more available, and they also know their patients. Okay, so that's the form. It's not difficult, never was too difficult, but it's one of those things that nobody likes to fill out a form. So, you know, we can't at Ostomy Canada or NSWOC nurses, you know, we can't say this is the way you do it and this is the way it's going to be, because we're here to give awareness and to just tell them where the form is. And like Rosemary does, just kind of guide them through it of what she thinks. And the same way with me, I've helped people and many people over the years. So Rosemary, I think
let me take us to, I suppose it could happen that your application is declined. I have to admit, since I've been involved with this and working with patients, I am not aware yet of anybody of that happening here locally in Vancouver with any of my patients. However, I have heard of it, and it can happen. And in general, I would say it's because the form has not been completed properly. And so that's usually the main reason. So suggestions are to definitely redo it, but apply at a later date. And also you can speak to somebody at the CRA. There's agents there to assist you. You'll get a letter to indicate why you must reapply. or rather, if you're approved, the letter will indicate when you must reapply. I've had some patients just recently tell me, they've called me and they said, Rosemary, I did the disability tax credit. It's been going great. But hey, the CRA has asked me to reapply. Should I be worried? And I went, no, that's normal. It's okay. So they just like to do that. And it varies. Some people will get a call, maybe it might even be 6 years later or 7. There's not a set time frame, but it's very within, it makes sense to me that CRA is just doing a double check and asking people who have received the disability tax credit. They're asking them to reapply and just confirm the information and set them on the course for probably another 5 years. Next slide. So again, Ann has made this crystal clear, and I do too, that this form is not related to Ostomy Canada, but rather Ostomy Canada and NSWOC, we're just voices of people to share awareness that this exists and to give some suggestions and guidance on completion of that application process and who is eligible for the disability tax credit. So let's just talk a little bit about timing now. So you've put about the application. You know, when patients have sent it in, it's usually between 6 to 8 weeks before they receive a letter. Usually that is the time frame. I suspect it could be longer if you did your application in the middle of the tax season. So you can, it will indicate in a letter that you're approved. And if you tick that box to say, because this was new to you, but you actually have had your ileostomy for 3 or 4 years, then they will indicate on the letter that you will later be receiving a check. So again, declined, if your notice is declined, they'll explain why, but let's take some steps to look at that application form you sent in and kind of review it if you still have it, the one you sent in, to see what was it that there was sort of not communicated clearly. You know, there's a last, one other thing, and this is something, again, I think I will direct you to the CRA website, but if you have received the DTC, so on the next slide, there's the Registered Disability Savings Plan. So there is eligibility for contributions related to the Registered Disability Savings Plan. Again, I do not have a big file folder of knowledge on this, but I'm just going to direct you to the CRA website as it pertains to the Registered Disability Savings Plan once you have received approval for the disability tax credit. I'll hand things back to you, Ann, as we conclude.
Thanks, Rosemary. Just a little tip that I've learned over the years. When you get a letter back that says that you haven't been approved, you very well could get a letter that includes, we have furthered a request to your physician to ask for more information.
Right.
Now, as we all know, physicians are very busy and their secretaries are too. So when these letters come in, they're not high priority. So if you get that letter, because you will get a copy of what's sent to the doctor, or you'll get acknowledgement anyway that they have gone back to the doctor because they didn't think the doctor wrote enough information or the appropriate information. So my advice to you is don't just look at it and say, oh, well, I guess we'll have to wait. Call your physician or your physician's secretary and say, I've received a letter from CRA and this is what it said. If you could get the doctor to complete it or change it, whatever they request, or more information, I'd like to offer to come pick it up. So if you would call me and I'll come pick it up and send it back in again. And what happens here, it will get your application back to CRA much quicker, because as we all know, these applications, you know, for insurance, for all kinds of reasons in a doctor's office, there's a big basket. They're not the priority with the doctor, the sick people are. So those forms go, you know, and they get into the bottom and get into the bottom. And then all of a sudden you haven't heard from CRA and you wonder what's going on. However, lots of times I have found out, or a person has told me, it's still in the basket. So don't let it sit there in the basket. All you have to do is make a call, be nice, ask nicely if, you know, when it's completed, if you could come pick it up. That makes it aware, or them aware that, you know, you do have some urgency to get this in.
And it may even be that you set the appointment time because the physician is not sure what he has to correct, or she is not sure what they have to correct. So glad you mentioned that, Anne. So you really have to kind of keep on it. I just haven't really been lately having any experiences of people having it declined, which I'm really pleased about that. So
not many at all, Rosemary. Yeah, I don't get them either. You know,
good.
In the beginning, I was getting them from physicians asking me what's going on here. We have so many applications, we don't know what to do with them. But anyway, we do the best we can to make people aware.
Sure.
So I'll just move on here. I'd like to tell you about some interesting facts. The DTC credit is a department within CRA. I'm sure you all know that. But along with that, there's another committee, which it's voluntary. And very, very professional people sit on this committee, and it's called the Disability Advisory Committee. And they meet 3 times a year, and they listen to people. I mean, we have written over the years many, many times. I think there's the one letter that we're asking for NSWOCs to be able to certify the form. We have been writing that letter, changing a word here or there, but we have been writing that letter for, I would say, a good 7 years. And we're going to continue to write that letter. However, those are the people on that committee, on the Disability Advisory Committee. Those are the people that make suggestions to the CRA to change things. And this year, as I told you previous, they have 10 suggestions, and they're all good suggestions. In fact, 1 or 2 of them are suggestions that we've written into. We've most always been acknowledged any letters going in from Ostomy Canada and NSWOC. We normally do the letters together, and that partnership has at least produced a reply from CRA that we know that they have seen it. And of course, in today's report, we know also that they are considering doing the certification a bit differently. So we're just keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that this is going to happen this way. So just for some interesting facts, according to the 2021 report on the federal tax expenditures published, there's 1.2 million individuals claimed an amount for the DTC for 2018. Now that's not just eliminating or people living with ostomies. That is the entire package on, as you can see on your form, of all the disabilities that CRA cover. So, you know, 1.2 million people are being looked at and have a place in the data of the CRA for a disability tax credit in a lot of avenues. So this included about 770,000 eligible persons who claimed all or some portion of the credit for themselves. According to the report, the projected cost of the DTC for 2021 is estimated to be $1.3 billion for all disabilities who are eligible. So we can look at that, and I'm going to be kind because I believe in being kind in this circumstance. is $1.3 billion is going out to people with disabilities, not all like mine, but like many that I see every day. I walk down the street. Somebody can't see well, somebody's blind, somebody's in a wheelchair because they only have one leg, somebody doesn't have an arm. And us, we don't have a bowel or part of a bowel or a bladder, and we have to wear a device. So that pleases me to see those numbers. And the government does produce these reports every 2 years. So people living with disabilities, the most valuable tax credit for them and their supportive family member is the DTC. It's the most profitable one and the most valuable one. For 2021, it can be worth between $1,609 to $8,400, depending on the province of residence. So as we all know, the province and the federal budgets and the money that they have in their purses, it's normally always shared. So all you have to do to find out how much you would get if you got the full amount is to just go on CRA and the Disability Tax Credit website, and there's a chart there that will tell you by province how much the individual gets. Here in Nova Scotia, the last 2 years, I have got just a hair over $8,500 off of my taxable income. So, and like I say, there's other provinces that aren't so robust in that. But the total number of individuals with the DTC certificate, and I want to emphasize that, I'm not saying that this is the number of people living in Canada that have the disability of an ostomy. I'm saying that the total number of individuals with a DTC certificate by province, territory, and restriction, 2020, that's their last report, for eliminating. So this is only for the eliminating number. It's not the numbers for all these disabilities. It's overwhelming. But for our little world and our little niche that we make you aware of, and we work hard to encourage you to apply and pray that you do. And we love the happy faces when you do get a check or you get the credit. There are 138,490 people in Canada that eliminate through an ostomy that have been approved for a DTC certificate. Now, don't get confused with that number that there's 138,000 people living in Canada with ostomies, because the population, there is so many that have never applied, probably never will, or they don't yet know about it, or they're going to have a temporary and think they're going to have it reversed in a year, so they're not going to bother. But these figures, 138,490, our government is paying them a disability tax credit for eliminating. And those are reports that have come from the government. So to close, Ostomy Canada Society would like to acknowledge the Disability Tax Credit Committee for their commitment to support and awareness. For the past 8 years, we have been in partnership with NSWOC and share the same vision to our ostomy population, our members, and our patients. We are truly appreciative of our people who continue to advocate for the benefits to make a better life for people living with an ostomy. And I'm sure Rosemary has a closing as well, because she has done the same as I have, and all of our committee members, and advocated this for an enjoyable 8 years.
Yes, very much so, very much so. And I really feel even more passion as we go into 2023 to keep the momentum going and even spread the awareness further. I find out I get opportunities in settings related to wound or ostomy care, but somehow that talk, I slip in the little comment of, by the way, do people know about the disability tax credit, especially when I'm with a group of physicians? That is really helpful because quite a few of them are not aware. So it is a passion that I'm going to carry on with even more perseverance and awareness. So thank you, Ann, for today.
Thank you, Rosemary. And we'll turn it back over to Troy now.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much to both Ann and to Rosemary, and I'll welcome you back onto our call here with your audio and your video turned on. We do have quite a few questions that have popped up, and I want to make sure we have a chance to get to them. I just want to again apologize to everybody for some of those technical glitches, but I appreciate you all sticking on with us here. So if I can maybe ask Ann or Rosemary, if either of you feel comfortable asking this question. Someone just wanted to reiterate again, is reapplying necessary if you get approved after, let's say, the first year, it's your first time applying? Do you need to reapply the following year? Is it good for a certain amount of years? Do you mind just reiterating again the reapplication process if necessary, and maybe even just touch on that 5-year threshold that was brought up earlier in the presentation?
And I'm going to hand that one to you for sure. Okay.
When you apply for the disability tax credit, you will get a letter back, and in that letter, it will either say you're declined or you're approved. However, when it is approved, they will go on to say that that in a period of 5 years, we will reapproach you to reapply for it again. I have also many people that I've spoke to that there's nothing on there. Mine 21 years ago said, if we see a need to reapproach you about your disability, we will send you a letter to reapply. In 21 years, I've never ever got a letter asking, but the norm is 5 years, and you just apply exactly like you would have the very first time. Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you for answering that. And maybe Rosemary, I'll ask you this question. Someone was just asking about whether your physician or your medical doctor or your nurse practitioner, do they have to fill out a separate form, or are they filling out the same form that the person living with an ostomy is filling out? Do you mind just touching on that quickly?
Sure. It is the same form. What I find is I'll bring patients into my clinic. We'll go to the CRA website. We can download it, and we can look at each of the sections and look at what the content should be. And then they are taking that form to their doctor's office, their general practitioner, their nurse practitioner, and there's a section on the final page that they sign. They put their address and their information on. And then those 12 pages go in an envelope, and there's areas on the page where it says where to send it to, depending on which province you're in. So often in BC, we're sending it to the Winnipeg office.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you for going over that. Another question, maybe I'll pass it over to Ann here, is just again, just to reiterate when someone can begin the application process. So let's say it's been 6 months since your ostomy surgery. You know it's going to be lasting beyond 12 months, but you're not quite at the 12-month mark yet. Is it something you would have to wait until after 12 months to begin filling out? Do you mind just sharing your thoughts on that?
If you had your ileostomy surgery in January, start counting your 12 months, have your form ready and your pens ready to go and your doctor lined up, but you cannot mail it to CRA until that 12 months has passed. So 1 day passed, send it in. They're not going to look at it unless you've had it 12 months.
Perfect. Thank you. So the next question here, and maybe I'll kind of pass it to either of you. Some people have been talking about already receiving some sort of funding, either for ostomy supplies. Some people are saying from Manitoba or through a program in Ontario. Do you know if this would be in conflict with submitting the disability tax credit application, or is this completely separate?
Completely separate, not in conflict at all. It's a whole separate thing that the federal government recognizes that people with an ostomy for 12 months or more can apply for this disability tax credit. Each province, we all have various supports and funding models for those with an ostomy, but the disability tax credit is unique. It is federal, goes right across the country, a whole separate entity that you would be applying for. Is that, how did I do, Anne? Is that about right?
Good, good.
Okay.
Yep. The ones that are people are talking about giving the money for supplies, or actually getting them supplies. Each province is different, so it's very difficult for us to keep up on the information about what each province supplies, because every time there's a new budget, it changes as well. So
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you for going over that there. Another question that came up beforehand was, sorry about that, I'm just trying to find my notes again here. Some people were asking about maybe just going over what to do if maybe it's the first time you're approaching your physician, or maybe you haven't had luck getting a response back from your physician, or maybe someone has approached their family doctor who doesn't think that living with an ostomy is a form of disability, at least with the tax credit. Could you share either some of your experience or maybe some of your suggestions on how you might approach your physician to make sure they're aware that this is an eligible disability, and maybe just touch on that theme?
Do you know, I think one thing that comes to mind, generally with my patients, I'll meet with them and we'll review things, but I have to say the pamphlet, having, if they go to Ostomy Canada, the website, and they download a copy of the disability tax credit pamphlet, that could be really helpful going to your physician's office with that. That's one thought. The other option too is that I actually often provide my name and telephone number. So when the patients go to their physician, if the physician has any questions about it, or there's any hesitancy, I like to be a voice of answering any of his or her questions. So those are two thoughts that come to mind. Anything you want to add to that, Anne?
Yes, lots of times I'm sure many people in the audience have heard physicians say, you know, I don't believe in this, and I'm not going to fill out the form or sign it because I don't believe that you're disabled. Well, if I could jump up on my desk right here and you could all see me, and if I hadn't already told you I had an ostomy, would you know I have one? Well, of course you don't know. So I don't look disabled. I can walk, I can talk, I can hear, I can see. However, I have lost my complete bowel. I've had a complete colectomy and nobody knows it. And I wear a device. So when your doctor says that, my best answer that I tell people is, I didn't make this rule. Canadian Revenue Agency made this rule. They included me and everybody with an ostomy in the disability tax credit. I didn't put myself there. I didn't walk there and fill out a form just because I wanted to. Our CRA said, you can do this. You have something missing. Exactly. Same way with an eye gone, a leg gone, an arm gone, the hearing. So that's what I always tell my people. You know, make that doctor that's so, he's just so strong in his thinking that you're just not disabled, because they can't see the disability.
Perfect. Well, thank you for going over that. I'm going to quickly switch over to a different topic here, and this was talking about the two new charts in the disability tax form, talking about severity and frequency. A couple people were asking if there's either a key that exists or some sort of glossary that exists for how they can figure out whether they're the severity is either low or moderate high. Maybe if we can just go over again how you might think about that, and again, reiterating that you're still eligible as an applicant no matter what you are on the scale. So maybe I'll pass it to Anne, because I think you were talking about that during your presentation.
Yes.
Just talking about those two scales that are new in the tax credit.
It is new, and everybody questions, and I certainly did, and Rosemary did, and everybody else that has worked over the last year with them. And what we've come up with is, they're doing this for a reason, and I severely believe that it's for a data reason. So they just want to know a little bit more about that so that they can have more records. And so when you look at it, when you look at the question 4, it says provide examples of the factors that limit the patient's ability to personally manage their bowel or bladder functions using the severity and frequency scales provided as a guide. For example, they always require assistance from another person to manage the bowel or bladder functions. So if I was disabled and was in a wheelchair constantly, and I needed help to get me, a nurse or home care to get me into the bathroom and out of the wheelchair and onto the toilet so that you could empty, then that's more severe because they need more help. I don't need help. So I consider myself to be moderate. So you have to stop and think when you fill out this, that it's talking about you. And the same way when, with frequency, they're talking about output as well. They just want to know, is a strong and a lot of output more manageable or less manageable? Well, no, it's more manageable because you're trucking at the bathroom all the time and you're staying there longer. I once, years ago, I performed a lot of little tests when I got into this committee, and the word inordinate always bothered me, and I wondered where the government ever picked up that one. Anyway, it led to a lot of things that word did. So the one thing that I did test, I tested a lot of things, but they always say that we take an inordinate amount of time. And I thought, well, why is that different than the normal person that has a bowel? So I decided to go to a store, and I went into the washroom, and I waited until one lady went in the booth next to me and I went into the other one, and I timed us. She was long gone. She was out in the shop with her cart shopping before I got out there. Now, I'm not saying I was in there half an hour, but I was in there a lot longer than her because I had more to do in there. So that's where that inordinate amount comes in, is because it does take us. It takes us longer. So the same way with the frequency, excuse me, and the severity. Some people don't have a lot of output, or they don't have a lot of care, and it goes for the other way. And if you just look at it as if it's you and ask yourself the question, you'll be able to answer it. CRA does explain it online, and I think you could work it out really easy. Okay.
Well, thank you, Ann. And I know we've only got a few minutes left in this presentation, so we'll try to just get a couple other ones in here. So one of the questions that was asked here is, maybe we can just go over this. This was right at the end when you're giving the facts about the total number of people who were approved for the DTC, and especially those who fit under the eliminating category. So someone asked, and maybe you can quickly just touch on this. Does this mean that there are 138,000 plus persons with an ostomy that applied in Canada? And does it imply that the actual number of persons living with an ostomy is larger than that, since those are the only ones who applied for it and got the DTC? Are there probably more than that in Canada? And before you answer that, I would like to maybe pair that with one of our final questions too, which would be about how someone can get involved, or maybe just reiterate how Ostomy Canada Society is involved in advocating towards the CRA and towards the government of Canada to support either funding for people living with an ostomy, yeah, just talk about the advocacy that we're doing on that note, but also talking about the potential increase in numbers than what we've previously seen online.
Okay, the first part of the question Okay, I forgot it already.
Sorry, maybe I did a bad job of that. So
No,
I guess
just start
I'll
off.
simplify it. I'll simplify it to say that yes, the number that Ann provided in the presentation, that 138,000 plus people who were approved for the DTC under the eliminating category. That
Yeah,
just
I'm good
explains,
now,
that's the number that
Troy.
we got. Okay, go for it.
Okay, sorry about that. Under the CRA DTC committee, there is a DAC, which means Disability Advisory Committee, and they are not connected with the government. They're ordinary people out of the general public that are chosen to go in, and they meet 3 or 4 times a year. And those people listen to people like Ostomy Canada, NSWOC, nurse practitioners, people, and each year they try to think what can we do to make it easier to get the disability. How they're constantly doing something, and they're very good at reporting. They're always 2 years behind. Like, so 2023 now, I just have the 2021 reports. And that's where those numbers come from. But if you've seen on the website, it said 1,038,000 people have the disability tax certificate. So that means in Canada, in 2021, there was 138,000 people that had that certificate and were approved to get it, and could also get involved, because they have the certificate, in the registered saving plans or any other plans that go along. I think there's about 4 of them that have accumulated that they can pick up after they're certified. However, that is not the number of people that we have with the DTC or with an ostomy in Canada. There's older people that don't apply. There's babies that don't apply. There's people that don't know about it. There's people that don't want to bother. There's all kinds of reasons. We find them every day. There's doctors that refuse them, and they get upset, so they don't apply.
Right. So yeah, the number of ostomates in Canada, or people with an ostomy in Canada, probably is much more than just that 138,000, which is amazing. And I'm seeing we're just almost at the end of our time here. So to simplify the second part of that, people were asking, how do we get in contact with the Disability Advisory Committee, or how do we, at least with the DTC Joint Advocacy Committee with NSWOC and Ostomy Canada? I don't know, Ann, if you know that, if we have a specific email for it, but I think probably the best way, if I were to recommend, would be to email Ostomy Canada at info1@ostomycanada.ca. I'll make an announcement here, but that would be the best way. That general email inbox can get forwarded to the chair of our committee, and we can definitely make sure any concerns you have can get addressed at one of the upcoming meetings. That'd be the best way. So with that, I'm seeing that we're just past time here, so I'm gonna just say thank you very much to both Rosemary and Ann for taking the time to share your experience, your expertise, and being able to provide hopefully a little bit of support and you know, sense of security now going forward with those who are looking to apply or reapply for the disability tax credit. So I want to thank again everybody who's on the call today, and again for staying with us through those technical glitches. I do want to remind everybody that we will be having another webinar, another national webinar in April. That will be on April 19th, I believe. I'll just double check. April 19th, and the topic will still be to come. We'll be announcing that through our regular mediums as soon as we have that available for you. So thank you again to everybody. Thank you to Yasser behind the scenes, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you, and see you, Ann.
Troy.
Take care.
See you, Rosemary.
Bye.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Yasser.
thanks. Bye.